keep an eye on it. All right.
Cool. Thanks for joining. So we're starting a little bit late, and welcome to our first show and tell. We're working on the local digital collaboration discovery. If you haven't met me, I'm Stacey. I'm a delivery lead at DXW, and DXW is a supplier working with MHCLG on this discovery phase. I'll perhaps intro people as they speak rather than do all that now. So yeah, this is what we're gonna go through in our show and tell. So findings from the work that's been done so far. So Linda and Becky have done a ton of research already, and Linda's going to share the findings from that. I'm going to talk a bit about how we kicked off the discovery and what we did before this first sprint, what we've done in the last 2 weeks, and then what we're up to next. And this is broadly what we're working on. Our focus is particularly on understanding what MHCLG can do to support local authorities to collaborate and essentially deliver better services for users. Now I'm going to hand over to Linda.
Okay, for people who've been here a while, you'll probably know quite a bit of this, but Becky, Ben and I started back in March thinking about what we might do first to try and understand how councils work. And we worked together for quite a while before we decided to set this kind of objective. So we planned to map journeys of digital projects in order to see where there might be opportunities for collaboration. And we wanted to look at whether the stages were similar across councils and whether there were similar people involved in making decisions. We recruited via the newsletter and Twitter and through existing contacts. And we created this kind of discussion guide to kind of map the process to try and see where those stages were. And then we did 3 interviews, and by the third we realised that this was just getting too complicated. It wasn't working very well. So we moved on, and we kind of had spent time having a broader conversation about collaboration, but we still talked about one specific journey on most of them. And in this time, we visited 8 councils and spoke to 13 people. We tried to get a mix of councils, but the fact was for this round, it was a bit of an experiment, and we were talking to people who we could get to speak to us in the time that we had. And afterwards, I started doing analysis via Trello, and then Stacey, Darian, the team from DXW arrived, and they introduced us to Miro. So then I started using Miro instead to look at the findings. And here's a summary of some of the things that people were talking about. Culture. It has a big impact on local authorities. It came up in quite a few interviews. And when people talk about culture, they're talking about how open a council is in terms of like being able to share with each other and flexible working and tools. It's generally perceived as being driven by the top, and also that it can be changed with the change of management. So one council talked about how previously they weren't encouraged to work in teams. They were across teams, but then when a change in management happened, that all changed. You won't be surprised, I'm sure, to hear this, but time and capacity is just a massive challenge for councils. This limits their ability to like go to events and learn from others and consider how to do things better. So one council in particular talked about the challenge of going to conferences. Not only is there no resource for that, but if they did do that, then they would be doing that day's work at night time. There wasn't any space to go to conferences, but that wasn't in all councils. Some got to go. And then one council talked about collaboration needing time and space to play with a thing. So the code might be there, but if they don't have any time to sit down, play with it, think about it, how they might implement it locally, then it's kind of wasted. And I thought this was really important because it kind of makes us think about how the fund works and what we might use it for in the future. Why do digital projects start? By and large, through a need to make savings. Like funding cuts have obviously had massive impact on councils, and there's a massive need to make savings. But there's other triggers, including like consolidating of services, council trying to do contracts ending, and then maintenance grants. this came up about sort of councils spend a long time sort of building a spec to go out to tender with. They talked about teams kind of having unrealistic expectations about what could be done when you're building a thing. So then that would lead to either a really large spec going out to procurement, which would limit the number of suppliers, or this kind of gold-plated approach where the teams would want everything automated, which means there was delays in implementation because you couldn't like deliver a thing and move on. You had to kind of try to make it perfect. Working with suppliers was mixed experience. So in some cases there were some negative experiences where suppliers hadn't delivered as promised. And this was partly due to the bidding team being a different team to the delivery team, promising the world and then, I can't remember, there's one promising BMW and getting a Ford Fiesta. That was one council said. But other councils describe really positive experiences, a real trusted relationship, and sort of a strategic partner that would be the messenger between the councils. So the council would say to the supplier, this is what needs changing, and would have a level of trust that that would happen and that would help all councils. And in one instance, the supplier had been really crucial in driving culture change in the organisation through like coaching staff to work in agile and bringing in jeans and jumpers. I think it's clear that working collaboratively is not just a thing that councils can do. It's actually really challenging. There's incompatible systems, complex governance, different priorities, and just the fact that it's not a corporate objective to collaborate, so to get it in there and happening is challenging. People refer to politics a lot and what a blocker that is, but I think there's definitely some more exploration around what exactly is it about the politics, like are these projects really going up to that level? Don't know. And there's a variety of access to collaborative tools like Trello and Teams and forums like Slack. Where collaboration had worked well, it seemed to be through pre-existing relationships, people who knew each other and they were driven to deliver a thing. So, like this person said, it was a coalition of the willing. It was people that wanted to work together and share stuff. And someone else talked about it being a gentleman's agreement, so trying to get people to work together. But then they also talked about that this is helpful on one hand because it meant you could get together easily and just get going and do something. But on the other side of it, that means it limited how far it might go and how far it might be recognised within the council. Getting buy-in and aligning systems and thinking about goals from the outset were also highlighted as important for successful collaboration. And this didn't come up in every interview, but I wanted to bring it up just because I think it's important for our team. So of the councils we visited, 5 had signed the digital declaration, and they talked about it. The message isn't there yet. Like a lot more might need to be done for the whole council to know. I think we've been thinking about this for a while. We know it's the case, right? Sign the declaration, but then what? But then councils who hadn't signed it were actually, I think at least 2 of them were working in the open, and they were doing some of the things that we might want to happen as part of the declaration, but they weren't signing it because they didn't have a collaborative project at the moment, or they were wary about the commitments that they would be signing up to. So I think it's definitely worth something for us to think about. So in a nutshell, there's a quick summary of some of the things we found out. What's next? Well, last week we had a video playback session with members of the team, and we'll be continuing that. And that session was really just to show people what councils are talking about and what's been happening at interviews. And there's loads of questions from this, so many things that we could be thinking about. How might we encourage to drive culture change? How might we help to councils who want to sign the digital declaration without the gap becoming wider between the people who are trying to move forward? And there's also a group analysis session that should have gone in your calendar from Stacey today. But luckily, then DXW arrived, and now we have loads more people to work on it, and we can get even further in depth with this project.
So, in terms of starting the discovery, sure, okay. So as I mentioned, we're working as a single team. We're a multidisciplinary team, so we've got these people on the team. So this is really nice because we have researchers and service designers pairing with each other and kind of not only sort of supporting each other with the sessions, but also sharing skills and sharing experience. This looks like quite a large team. Some people here are part-time, so but yeah, that's kind of the core team that we've got. And a bit about kind of how we're working. So we're adopting an agile user-centered approach. We're also being iterative, so we're constantly kind of reflecting on how we're working together and how we can improve. The discovery itself is split up into sprints, and we're really, really keen to get other people involved in the wider team. So yeah, look out for our week notes. We've got these show and tells, but also user research. We'd really like to have people observe research, to note take, and generally just be part of what we're doing. And these are kind of our timelines. So we've reached the end of our first sprint, and we wrap up on the 16th of July. So we had an inception phase before the discovery started. This was about 2 weeks long, and we were mostly setting up the team, working with Linda and Becky to understand the work that's been done so far, and we held a workshop. And it was focused around 9 questions, which we recently published actually on the DXW blog, which really has helped us kind of produce a discovery plan, a research plan, and have a shared understanding of kind of our goals and what we want to achieve by the end of the discovery phase. Here's a snapshot of what that looked like. And this is our main hypothesis, really, that we're exploring in this discovery phase. And as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of a focus on understanding what MHCLG can do to support collaboration, as well as identifying the users that we'll need to work with to achieve that as well. So sprint 1, this was our sprint goal. As I said, we're very much building on the work that's been done so far. Based on that discovery plan that we produced in the inception phase, we planned and started recruitment for user research sessions. And we got 1 done in the first sprint, and we have 8 more so far planned for the next 2 weeks. We've actually got 1 this afternoon, and that's the reason why Sam and Alex aren't here for the show and tell, actually. And I'm going to hand over to Daria, who's going to talk a bit about the engagement we've been doing with stakeholders in this first sprint.
So hi, for those who don't know me, my name's Daria. I'm the service designer that has been working, only recently started at DXW. I'm very new to the public sector, so it's all been very new for me, but it's been a great learning curve. So one of the things we looked at was, as a result of the research that Linda and Becky had done, they had planned a lot of the users that they wanted to speak to, but there was this other side of it that kept coming through in the interviews of like the suppliers that facilitate some of these collaborations between local authorities, and also some of the groups that already exist to facilitate collaboration. So we've mapped out what we think that looks like, and here what we have is the core group that are making decisions on this project, and so MHCLG and various other groups. And then further out, we've got the stakeholders that we want to engage and consult with regularly. So the local authorities, who are going to be presumably the key users of this, core LOTI members, and other groups like that. And then we're going to keep a certain population informed and then another population aware. And on the left there, what you can see is there are also some spaces that we've identified where collaboration already happens. So there are groups like CC2I who kind of crowdfund local authority projects, and various other ones. I'm not going to dwell too much on who they are, but I did want to say we've spoken to a number of them already. We've spoken to 3 of these groups already, and we had some really interesting insights coming out, a lot of it reflecting the same stuff that Becky and Linda have found. But there's some other really interesting perspectives from the other side of people that have worked in the public sector for a really long time, and kind of pulling out all the things that have made collaborations unsuccessful, as well as the key ingredients that we need to have in order for things to thrive. So this is a sentiment that's been repeated in a few of these interviews. Oh, that's the wrong. There we go. And which is basically, this has been done a number of times before. and we want to make sure that it actually sticks and gets under the skin of some of the things that we can learn. So that is a core view, and I don't want to talk too much about some of the findings from the stakeholder interviews, just because we've only done a couple so far. But I really liked this quote, so I thought I'd bring it out, which is, "It's become a bit of a talking shop. MHCLG should knock their heads together and push them in one direction." And this is in response to one of the questions that we've been trying to pick out from our stakeholders, which is, what is MHCLG's role within local authorities collaborating? What should they actually be doing? And on from that, we've done some analysis. So Becky started working on this evidence safari, so pulling out all these different places where collaboration happens, all the groups. We started classifying them and linking them up. And when we were doing that, we were thinking about all the different types of collaboration that exist. So we've got 4 here that are the core ways that we've identified that this happens. And I'm just going to read out. So we've got networking, and that is knowing where to meet other people who might be facing similar challenges, which we think is the first step to building closer informal relationships between local authorities. And anecdotally, we've seen that that's actually how most of the collaborations form initially. It's all about the relationships that people have, and you can have all the other ingredients being like the perfect mix, but if the relationships aren't there, then the collaboration just won't happen. Knowledge sharing, which is alignment on issues and sharing approaches, research tools, practices and problems. Resource sharing, where we're sharing things like code or access to platforms or other tangible things. And delivery, which is working together jointly in partnerships to solve problems and deliver new services. So by categorizing all the different places where where collaboration happens against these, we can see that there's actually some patterns starting to form. There's a heavy bias towards the networking and knowledge sharing side, and actually much less happens on resource sharing or delivery. So we think there's something interesting there to be unpicked, and we're looking to understand more about that as we go through the project. So I'll keep you updated. Thank you.
What about now? Right, sprint 2. This is our next sprint goal. So it's all about doing primary research, basically. We've got those 8 interviews lined up, as well as continuing that engagement work with stakeholders as well. And these are some of the councils that we'll be speaking to over the next 2 weeks. So yeah, more engagement with stakeholders too. And we'll also be analysing what we've learned so far and sharing this as we go. As Linda said, we've got that group analysis session. But yeah, as we've only done one interview in this sprint, we haven't sort of shared much of that here. But in the next show and tell, we'll look to sort of share a lot more of those findings. And finally, we're also going to have a workshop at the end of this next sprint to identify opportunities and potential solutions. We'll use this kind of technique, which I can talk more about after perhaps, which will sort of help us shape our recommendations and help us kind of collectively decide what we need to explore next and how this can kind of be taken forward. This is an example from another project of what that will look like. But yeah, I'm happy to talk more about that approach, but also anyone's welcome to join that workshop if they like as well. And that's it. Thank you very much for joining. Does anybody have any questions?